The Middle Ages, though being a time of cultural vacancy, was a great time for technological advances. Take gunpowder, for example. It was the beginning of the modern gun. Another example of technological advancement was the use of biological warfare. They would put diseased corpses of the victims of the Black Death on a catapult and sling them over the walls of a city to infect the population. Speaking of the catapult, they also made many improvements to the early catapult we saw in Roman times. Another weapon of the Dark Ages is the invention of the steel crossbow. This weapon had a force of over 5,000 pounds and had a range of over 300 meters. Another ranged weapon of the Middle Ages is the English longbow. It was a powerful hunting weapon and a great weapon in battle. They also had the longsword, which pierced chainmail. Speaking of chainmail, it helped protect the wearer from attacks from arrows and minor blows from swords and other weapons. Another interesting topic on the technology of the Middle Ages are the innovations they made on their infrastructure and general technology. For one, they made vertical windmills, which helped with crushing grain and other produce. One of the greatest achievements of the Middle Ages was the printing press. It made it possible for the common man to learn how to read and write in the vernacular language. The Middle Ages saw the beginning of the castle and drawbridge. They also created the hourglass and the minute glass, which made the outdated sundial useless. Another invention of the Middle Ages was a mechanical clock. They also made advances in their smithing and metalworking with the blast furnace. They also made water mills which helped farmers by watering crops for them.
Have you heard of the plague?
Yeah, I've heard of the plague.
Have you seen what it does to its victims?
One of the biggest aspects of medieval life was music, some of their instruments being the trumpet, flute, bagpipe, cornet, the lute, the harp, fiddle, snare, and cymbals. One of the famous composers of the Middle Ages was Hildegard von Bingen, who was a true Renaissance woman. She wrote music for the Catholic Church, some of which is still used today. Music was a huge part of medieval life. It was used from everything from street performances to concerts for the wealthy. It was used in social gatherings so much that the artist playing became just as vital as the food there.
So what do you think we should do with this body?
I don't really know. Man, I'm starting to feel sick.
Dark Ages was called dark for a reason, and that's not just because of the Black Death. They had many gruesome and just downright evil ways to get information out, or to just execute you for a crime. One way of execution was the Brazen Bull. It was a hollow, brass bull with a compartment to lock people inside. They would lock people inside, then light a fire under the bull to roast them alive. Their screams would make a sound like a raging bull outside of the nose. Another insidious torture device were the thumb screws. They were an iron casing that went around your thumb. They would then shove wood panels down your thumbs with screws, crushing them in the process. One awful form of execution was flavored by Vlad the Impaler. It was impalement. They would shove a huge wooden spike through a live person. They would then sit there until they died. Another execution favored by Jesus was crucifixion. The executed would be nailed by the cross on their hands and feet and hung there until they either choked to death on their own blood or died from dehydration. There was also the rack. The basic idea is that the person who was to be tortured was tied down to this wooden rack which would expand, pulling the arms and legs out of their sockets. A way they would execute witches was the stake. As shown in many movies and shows, the prosecuted would be tied to a wooden stake in the ground and with foot underneath it. The executioner then lit the wood under the stake to burn the victim alive. Finally, we have the Iron Maiden. This device was an iron sarcophagus with a total of 21 spikes that would puncture vital organs. The spikes were not long enough to be instantly fatal, but instead the victim would instead bleed out and slowly and painfully.